Chris Watson and Jason Hennessy for Bridal Traffic. And this chapter is called Getting Serious About Google Local. If you're watching this DVD, then there's a good chance you saw us launch a small video series that taught you how to get your site, even if you don't have a site, your company listed on Google Local.
Chris, before we actually get into this chapter, what I want to do is I want to paint a clear picture of what this chapter is going to be about, because Google Local is essentially free advertising. If you had the opportunity to have a free billboard in your specific area, let's say you're driving down the major highway of Los Angeles or in New York City, Times Square, and somebody said, hey, we'll give you a free billboard to advertise your company, but I just need you to do about maybe 10 minutes worth of work, maybe an hour worth of work. Chances are you would spend that 10 minutes because you know that there's a lot of reward tied to that. So that's basically exactly what this chapter is about, and this is Google Local.
Yeah, Jason, that's a really good picture and it's quite apt. And just to be clear, what we're talking about with Google Local, it's these maps that are up here for virtually every search that you're doing. They've only been around for about a year and a half, so it's not like people who are ranking on them now have been doing so for a long time. It's still somewhat new to Google, but it's essentially these maps that show the location of your business, and it works off of your website. So it is, in fact, free traffic and free advertising if you can post your site and your company, in the top ranking spots for Google Local. But now it's one thing to get your site and company on Google Local. It's quite another thing to be competitive on Google Local. Now, the people who've watched the launch videos, there's probably a bunch of you out there that have already gone ahead and set up your Gmail accounts and got into Google Local and set up a listing, only to find that, hold on, I'm not ranking on page 1, or I'm not ranking on page 1, 2, or 3. And then you have to click on maps and you found you're on page 3 or 4 or something like that, and that's not good enough, right?
Hey, Chris, before we go any further, let's take a moment to recap here for those that might not have seen those videos. So the first thing that we want you to do is we want you to set up a Gmail account. It's easy and it's also free to register, and you can do that right at gmail.com. Okay, now once you do that, the step 2 would be to go to Google/local/add, ADD, just like you see on the screen here, and then log in with your Gmail login details. And then the third step would be to click Add a New Business right there at the top. And then from here, we're going to build your listing based on the steps that Chris is going to talk about.
So the idea of this chapter, now that we've got you set up on Google Local, is to make you competitive. It's important to understand that there's a dance between Google Local, your website, and SEO and inbound links and all this stuff. But Google Local is very different. It's sort of unto itself. If you will, just picture this. There are really 3 components to Google. The first one is what we focus on a lot. It's called organic traffic. Getting people to the top of Google without having to pay anyone anything is just brilliant, right? Although it does take time to rank organically, and if time is money, you still kind of have to pay for organic traffic if you want to look at it that way. The next piece of the puzzle is Google Local. Like Jason was saying before, if someone shows you how to get a free billboard on a highway, you definitely do it, right? And that's what Google Local is. Now, the third part is what's called pay-per-click advertising. These are the ads that show up on the right-hand column, or what we call the right-hand rail. And we won't really touch on that in this series. That's sort of a separate discipline and requires a separate and extensive DVD series. But as we said, what we do want to teach you in this chapter is how to take your Google Local listing that you've already created and start to make it really competitive. Now, as I've said before, there are about 37 factors. There might be a bit more, but from what we can see, there's roughly 37. And this is by no stretch of the imagination the be-all and end-all definitive comment on Google Local. This is just from what we've seen. It's our take on it based on research and experience from what the factors appear to be that affect your ranking on Google, or rather Google Local. Again, what you're trying to do is in your local area, top rank, being in position 1, 2, or 3 for Google Local when those results come up. So let's just walk through what these are, what the 37 factors are. And by the way, I'm not going to bore you with examples of all 37 in a video context. So what we're going to do here is run through the top 10 things that will affect your ranking in a positive way. Then there are about 7 things that you definitely shouldn't do with your listing. But let's start off with the very first positive thing that you can do for your listing, the number 1 thing in our opinion. And we've ranked these things from matter of significance from 0, meaning not significant at all, and 10, meaning the most important thing. So the top thing that comes to mind is whether or not your local business listing is in the city of the search that you want to rank for. I mean, it sounds obvious, but you'd be amazed at how many people try to do things like if you're in Denver, Colorado, but you're trying to rank for somewhere else in Colorado on a Google Local map, well, that just isn't going to fly with Google Local. So Google is all about making sure that they can determine whether or not you are a local supplier, that you're telling the truth, and that they can verify that truth. Just by you submitting your Google Local listing, it isn't enough. So first, you have to be in that city. And then, if it's just your listing that says, hey, I'm in that city, that's still not nearly enough confirmation for Google. So We'll walk into that.